Hello. We're going to be starting in Matthew chapter 27, verse 11 this morning. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, saying, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said to him, "It is as you say." Su legis, you say it, which is correctly translated as you say, right? While he was being accused by the chief priests and elders, he answered nothing. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" But he answered him not one word, so that the governor marveled greatly. Now, this should remind us very much so of Isaiah chapter 53. We read there, I have everything highlighted, so then it's hard to find the one thing you're looking for when everything is highlighted. As a sheep, he was led as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearer is silent, so he opened not his mouth. Verse 7. So we see Jesus. Not only does he know what's coming, but he has no need to defend himself because he's not guilty of anything. It's amazing because Jesus probably could have put many of these people in their place. He had the knowledge. He had the ability. He wasn't afraid of speaking. Yet with wisdom, not only because he knew what the outcome was supposed to be, but he knew what the outcome would be, that arguing with these guys probably wouldn't accomplish him very much of anything. Verse 15 now, it says, "Now at the feast, the governor was accustomed to releasing to the multitude one prisoner whom they wished. And at that time they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore, when they had gathered together, Pilate said to them, 'Whom do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Christ?' For he knew that they had handed him over because of envy. And while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent to him, saying, 'Have nothing to do with this just man, for I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him.' But the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitudes that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor answered and said to them, 'Which of the two do you want me to release to you?' And they said, 'Barabbas.' Pilate said to them, 'What then shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?' All said to him, 'Let him be crucified.' Then the governor said, 'Why? What evil has he done?' But they cried out all the more, saying, 'Let him be crucified.' When Pilate saw that he could not prevail at all, but rather that a tumult was arising, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, 'I am innocent of the blood of this just person. You see to it.' And all the people answered and said, 'His blood be on us and on our children.' Then he released Barabbas to them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he had delivered him to be crucified." Now, what we find here, and what we seem to actually find in verse 26, and when he had scourged Jesus, and I believe really, whether it's a wording thing, semantics, or a translation thing, Jesus having been scourged, he then delivered him to be crucified. And the idea was that he had already tried scourging him, whipping him with this wicked whip with metal and these sharp objects in it that would literally grab the flesh and rip it off. I mean, it would be a horrific beating. And I think, again, he was trying to do all that he could to not crucify Jesus. We see him giving away Barabbas. But he was trying to see if, well, okay, he's guilty, but I can set a guilty person free. So maybe I can give him the death penalty and then set him free from the death penalty. And then I think another attempt was just to severely, severely beat him in order that maybe they would have been appeased with just such a severe beating. And very likely when we read in Isaiah 52 that his image, his visage, the way he looked was so marred and destroyed and contorted that he didn't look like a man. And perhaps that's exactly what Pilate was thinking. You guys need to beat him within an inch of his life. You need to make this the most insane beating you've ever done, because if it's that bad, maybe they'll let him go. And at the end, when nothing had prevailed, Pilate washes his hands so that he's not guilty of the death of Jesus. Back in verse 22, he says, "What then shall I do with Jesus who is called Christ?" You see, the problem we're running into is that Pilate tried to do everything he could to set Jesus free, other than simply declaring, "I'm going to set him free." Simply, no. Many parents struggle with this with their children. All these different ways to appease them rather than just, no. It's just so simple. No, you can't. No. But Pilate couldn't do that with the Jews. They wanted him crucified, so he tries beating him. They wanted him crucified, so he tries giving him a crucifixion sentence, but then letting him go because he can do that on this day. He tries everything within his power to let Jesus go free, but at the end of the day, he wouldn't just simply say no. He wouldn't reject the voices. This is where we read, I believe it was Mark's gospel we looked last time, but it talked about the voices of the crowd prevailed. He allowed these people's voices to prevail, and ultimately he caved into their desires. I want to take this two directions. There's a beautiful application of Barabbas, but I just don't feel like that's where we're going today. But it is a beautiful thought that Barabbas would have been constructing his own cross to carry, and Jesus would have literally taken Barabbas's cross from him and bore it himself. There's a beautiful picture in Jesus bearing his sins and literally, again, taking his cross. But twofold. When it comes to sin, sin will not be appeased. Sin will not be satisfied. When temptation comes, especially if you know you're prone to addiction, to temptation, to repetitive sin and repetitive failing in some area, there's no way to just appease that. Well, maybe I'll just take the edge off with just this because this isn't that. Maybe I'll go around here. Maybe I'll try this. Maybe I'll try that. But at the end of the day, the only real solution is just flat out saying no. Rather than a roundabout trying all these ways to appease the flesh. Maybe I can satisfy my flesh with this, and then it won't be craving that. Just got to learn to say no. Because when we appease it, eventually we will cave to it. Quite oftentimes when people know, well, maybe if I do this, it'll help me not do that. But the problem is in the end, when they start making this okay, they usually find themselves just drifting right on back down that path that leads them into that same sin all over again. And on the other side, kind of looking at almost like the inverse or whatnot to this, is saying yes. You see, Pilate eventually said yes to the people instead of, in a sense, saying yes to Jesus. And at the end of the day, nothing apart from saying yes to Jesus can save your soul. You can't work your way in there and find some roundabout way. Nothing replaces true repentance and regeneration. You can't start trying to be a good person, start trying to go to church more, start trying to this and start trying to that. Everything you can do to fix your life apart from just simply saying no to yourself and to your flesh and saying yes to Jesus. Pilate washed his hands, but that symbolic act did nothing. And you can take communion and go to church and put money in the offering plate, but none of that means anything. It's just symbolic acts if you don't say no to self and yes to Jesus. And so nothing else will do. No, there's no way around it. So let our yes be yes and our no be no. And let us just learn to just do the hard things sometimes rather than trying to find some roundabout way of fixing the problems ourselves, rather than just going straight to the heart and just saying yes to Jesus, saying no to self and to the flesh, and just simply obeying God, simply. All right, guys, that is it for this morning. We're moving into the crucifixion tomorrow, and we'll just see how much more we've got as we work our way through this text. You guys take care.